Recently, a group of your fellow citizens met with the director of the Conference on Economic Progress, Mr. Leon Kaiserling, well-known economist and former chairman of President Truman's Council of Economic Advisors. Mr. Kaiserling is now greeting those who are to question him. Now for the first question.
Mr. Kaiserling, we've been told that inflation was brought about by wars or by very high prosperity. Recently, however, with factories still running at part-time and unemployment still very high, the cost of living and prices are still climbing. Can you explain this?
Well, this is really something that has puzzled almost everybody. And we can understand this best, I believe, if we look first at the period leading up to the economic recession, because that will enable us to understand better where we are today. Now, business is perfectly entitled to set prices satisfactory to cover wage costs, to cover other business costs, and to yield reasonable profits. Reasonable profits are essential to the well-being of the American economy, and many businesses have not earned unreasonable profits. But a few key industries in this period leading up to the recession lifted their prices sufficiently so that after covering all justified costs, they had an unduly high level of profits. Let's look at this first chart here. Here we see auto prices up 5% in this period leading up to the recession. Profits up 24%. Steel prices up 10%. Profits up 15%. Retail food prices up 4%. Profits of the chain stores up 15%. And small home prices up 7%. Profits in the construction industry up 26%. This really shows very clearly that without these kind of price increases, we could have had plenty of fair and reasonable profits to cover costs and to give business what it is fairly entitled to.
Well, Mr. Kaiserling, I'm a wage earner, and I think a fairly typical wage earner. Over and over again, I've heard that wage increases cause price increases. In addition, we hear that the government's support of farm prices has caused inflation and high prices. What about those arguments?
Well, what we have heard over and over again and read over and over and over again is not supported by the facts. The facts are that in general, so far as wages are concerned, salaries, farm incomes, in general, they haven't risen enough in this period leading up to the recession to enable consumption to grow enough to keep up with our growing ability to produce. That's why we got into the recession. And if you compare wages with profits, what you see is that the prices were raised enough not only to cover the wage increases, but to cause the profits to rise very much faster than the wages. Now, I want to show you that in this next chart here. The second chart shows this. Here we have wages in the automobile industry going up 7% in this same period, and profits going up 24%. Here in the steel industry, we have wages going up 5% and steel going up 15%. Now, it's perfectly clear from this that even with these wage increases, if we hadn't had the price increases, there still would have been a plenty good level of profits. So far as the farm people are concerned, I've already called your attention to the retail, distributive prices and profits, which were too high. That's why we've had the high food prices. Now, I do not like to see from the welfare of every American, the wage earner and the farmer blamed improperly for some of the price inflation that's taken place.
Mr. Kaiserling, I've noted that you've talked mostly about the period leading up to the recession. Now, can you tell us what has happened since the recession begun? And further, what is happening now when we hear many people say that we are climbing out of this recession?
Well, the recession should have taught everybody a lesson, and it should have put an end to these unjustified price increases. This would have speeded up jobs, it would have expanded sales, it would have lifted production, it would have been good for business. Instead of this, we've still had, in some pacemaker industries, we've still had some more price increases during the recession. Now, let's look at that. And it's shown in this chart here very clearly. In the automobile industry, production down 41% in a year and a half, yet prices up 3%. In the steel industry, production down 42%, and yet prices up 6%. Now, suppose when production started going down, they had held their prices or even reduced them a bit. they'd have sold more steel, sold more cars, better for them, better for the country, and we wouldn't have gotten into the situation where we are today.
Mr. Kaiserling, that I can see that for cars and all of these things, but I'm a housewife, and I'm interested in the things that we have to buy every day, clothing, and especially food. And we know that prices have been going up in spite of the recession. I don't understand why this is so, and I'm wondering if we shouldn't be buying less. Wouldn't that take care of it?
Well, of course, 2/3 of our American housewives do buy automobiles, and they do buy the vacuum cleaners and the stoves and the refrigerators and the lawnmowers that involve steel prices. But you're perfectly right that what they're really concerned about is what they pay out every day for the market basket,
Right.
for food and for things like that. Now, certainly, it doesn't make sense to say that the average American family should buy less. The average American family isn't getting too much to meet its needs. And as a matter of fact, if the American family bought less, we'd have still more unemployment. We'd have still more economic trouble. We're not in a problem now because people are buying too much. They haven't got the income to buy enough. Now, you know the facts on this as to the rising prices, but I thought I'd get a little bit prepared anyway, so I have a chart, and I'm not going to let it get skipped since I've got it. Now, here, since the recession started, not before that, but after that, food prices up 4%. Medical care cost to the consumer up 4%. Transportation cost to the average American family up 3%. Personal care to the family up 3%. And even rent up 1%, although rent had gone up so much before.
Well, I see that, Mr. Kaiserling, but an economist has pointed out, as you see it in the newspapers all the time, but that it's necessary to have high prices and high profits. This makes it possible for business to build new plants and to provide new jobs, and of course that means wages. Isn't that reasonable?
Well, we want to be reasonable. We want to look at all sides of the picture, and there is that side to it. The American economy needs good profits. It needs investment. That's how we are able to increase our skills and lift our living standards, but it's got to grow in balance with consumption. Otherwise, you get idle plants and idle machines. Now I have a chart showing just how badly our economy got out of balance on consumption and investment. Here in the period of 4 or 5 years leading up to the trouble we're in now, consumption, and this includes not only the buying by average American families, but also the consumption by government through spending for necessary public works and roads and schools and education. That went up less than 2%, as we see here. Yet investment in factories and tools, which increased production, went up almost 3%. And this happened for the very reason that I've given. It happened because the wages and the farm incomes and the salaries that feed consumption, hurt by price inflation, didn't go up nearly as fast as the prices and the profits that feed business investment. So what's really happened is that the high unemployment today and the economic slack is the old story again of investment growing faster than the ability of the American family to consume.
Mr. Kaiserling, I've been fortunate in that I haven't been hit by unemployment in this situation. However, hasn't this lag of our ability to consume, which has been outrun by our ability to produce, hit families like mine as well?
Well, your family is more fortunate than those who've had an unemployed breadwinner. Nonetheless, we all know from our daily lives that rising prices and a slack economy hurt almost every average American family. And this is true because for a number of years, the ability of the average family, the employed as well as the unemployed, not to consume enough because it wasn't earning enough, has lagged behind our ability to produce. So we haven't had it because we haven't produced it, and we haven't had the jobs we needed because we haven't produced it. Now let's look at what's happened. During the last 5 years or so, the average American family has had $2,000 less of income for the period as a whole than if we had had full employment and full prosperity for our whole economy. Wage and salary earners have had about $68 billion less of wages than they would have had with full prosperity. And the farmers lost about $25 billion of income for the same reason. And business and professional people whose prosperity really rests upon the prosperity and buying of consumers, they've had about $27 billion less of income, and small business has been particularly hurt. Now, all this arises from the fact that due to this unemployment and economic slack resulting from the inflation and the other factors we've discussed, Our total national production over the past 5 years has been more than $120 billion too low, and we've all lost that. And we've had 8 million man-years more of unemployment than we would have had with full employment and full production. Wage negotiations must take proper account of the whole economic situation. And there aren't any wage contracts that have been signed recently that haven't taken account of the whole economic situation. But the real problem is, sure, we shouldn't have wage increases that force up prices. But on top of that, we do need the right kind of wage increases even now to help expand consumption, or we'll never get back to full prosperity. This is the really important problem now. And this is what the labor unions and the employers have been trying to accomplish. And I hope that they will accomplish it satisfactorily. Now, business shouldn't use this as a reason for raising prices, because this kills the goose that laid the golden egg. Prices should be stabilized. Profits can absorb it for a while, and then more sales and more consumption will take care of the situation. The steel industry raised its prices just last July, but last year they had almost the biggest profits on record, although steel production was really in the dumps. Now, this shows that with the steel industry now improving, the wage increases that are going forward don't require these price increases.
Mr. Kaiserling, from your view, what kind of programs are needed in America, for example, to check inflation, to reduce unemployment, and to permit all families in America to share in the prosperity and the rising standards of living that you've talked so much about?
Well, of course, this is the payoff question, and it's the payoff question for everybody. We need a program to expand consumption and living standards, because that's what everybody's prosperity rests on. This means price stability. The government should use its anti-monopoly powers toward this end if necessary. It means a higher program of farm income improvement. Farm income has been very depressed. It means improvements in ordinary wages and salaries, and in Social Security payments. It means that the government also should spend more for useful projects, roads, schools, education, to build jobs and consumption, and that the government should redistribute the tax burden so that it doesn't weigh so heavily upon the purchasing power of low-income families. Now, if we have a rounded program like this, which is good for everybody, here's how all American families will benefit. By 1964, if we do the right things, the average American family can have an income $2,000 more than it is today. Wages and salaries can be more than $100 billion higher than they are now. And farm income, of course, there are many fewer farmers, but it can go up by $10.5 billion, and should. And Social Security should be doubled. And with this, due to the prosperity of all, business and professional people, especially small business, will have $33 billion more of income. Where will this all come from? It'll come from the fact that with full employment and full prosperity, and without price inflation, we'll have $200 billion more in national production in 1964 than we have now. This country has a glorious future if we can hold prices level and if we can grow through the growth and the consumption and living standards of American families.
If you would like more information on the relationship of paychecks, prices, profits, and prosperity, write to the Conference on Economic Progress, 1001 Connecticut Avenue Northwest.